Welcome to the Equine Vet Connect Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carter. I'm a veterinarian and a farrier. The goal of this podcast is to educate horse people, break things down, bust myths, and keep it real. Speaking of breaking things down, here's my legal disclaimer to keep my attorney and insurance company happy. While I am a vet, I may not be your vet. Contact them before trying anything you hear on this podcast. Remember, just because you watched it on YouTube or heard it on a podcast does not mean you can do it. Please use common sense. Welcome back to the Equine Vet Connect Podcast. I'm Dan Carter. We're here at Countryside Equine Hospital, back in the old studio, old treatment room 1. I got Dr. Caroline Brown with me today. It's December, and so it's that time of year.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
The most wonderful time of years, you know. Mm-hmm. Coming up to celebrate Jesus' birthday. Santa Claus is on the way. Christmas carols getting sung. You got your holiday shopping going. And if you're in the breeding business, this is the time of year it all starts. As we start getting ready for breeding season, right?
Yep, yes it is.
So that's what today's going to be over. I think a great topic. So you want to breed your mare?
So you want to breed your mare?
So
yes, it is. I think something that every vet has probably heard at some point in their career, probably on a weekly basis. Of, well, I want to breed my mare.
Yep.
And the first thing I'm going to say to you, if you say I'm going to breed my mare, I'm going to say, why do you want to do that?
Great question. So, what are some things we do need to be considering? You know, I've got my thoughts on this. What are some of your thoughts if we're going to breed this mare? What do people need to be thinking about?
You know, because I think it's very easy to say, oh, I want to breed my mare. But, you know, breeding your mare it's a commitment to not just the short term, but, you know, to long term, because, you know, mare's pregnancy is almost a year. So we're going to be dealing with this mare for a year. And then now we have a foal on the ground. And in, you know, most of our disciplines that we're working with, you can't really do much with that foal for the first 2, 3, even more years of its life.
Yes.
So, and foals are really, really good at, you know, racking up vet bills in those first couple years when they're not doing anything.
Well, even just the process of getting there, right?
Right, and just so that's part of it, and then, you know, getting there. So it says, okay, we've got our mare, and let's, you know, figure out who we want to breed her to, and is she a good candidate to even breed, and, you know, or how are we going to be able to get her pregnant on the first try, or is this going to be a little bit more involved of a process? So there's a lot of things that are involved in it that I think, you know, when somebody just says, oh, I want to breed my mare, that I'm like, we need to think about this before we do this, because there's a lot to commit to here. So.
Well, and one of the things, again, I'm more of a performance horse guy. So one of the things I hear a lot on pre-purchases, or if I'm working on some of these horses and we're having a performance issue, having a lameness issue, I hear this a lot. Well, I guess if this doesn't work, or I guess if she goes lame, we can always breed her. And I can tell you, that's a yes and no question. Because I look at some of these horses, well, we're fighting tendon or ligament issues on more than one leg. We're fighting multiple limb lamenesses, and it's just a battle, and it has been. I'm like, are we sure we want these genetics?
Yes.
You know, maybe we need to look at this. Like, I get you have a one-off injury that may be career-ending, and it wasn't any fault of the horses. Yeah, all right, great. We got a broodmare. But the other thing you got to look at is if literally, you know, this mare is 7 years old, and we've been struggling keeping her sound, keeping her performing since she was 5. Maybe these aren't the genetics we need.
Right. And even a lot of these things that we haven't necessarily identified you know, one particular gene that does it, we know that some of these things are inheritable, like
Correct.
DSLD.
Yes.
We know that it has some sort of heritability.
DSLD, some of the neuromuscular conditions. I think the first one that ever got identified for those of you that have been around the quarter horse industry for a long time is the HYPP gene. I think that gene sort of changed how we look at breeding, because it was the first truly genetic trait that we identified a gene for, we're able to test for, and we can make decisions, should we continue passing this gene on or not.
Right. And, you know, and luckily now in the age that we live in, there are, you know, genetic tests that we can do before we even start the breeding process. So you can take your mare and say, hey, let's do a panel on her, and it's usually something simple as just pulling some hair, sometimes some blood. We send it in, a couple of weeks go by, we get some results as to, is she a carrier for any of these things? And that can, kind of help us to make our decision, say, okay, even if she is a carrier for some of these, is this something we want to risk? Or do we need to be a little bit more picky when we're looking at a stallion to breed or two to make sure that he's not a carrier for something?
Correct. Herda's one that we actually had a case of Herda this year where the mare was not, she was a carrier, but the stallion wasn't checked. After this particular mare carried this foal, we identified Herda. The stallion was checked. Lo and behold, he is a carrier as well. And so Herda's a condition, for those of you listening, where, for lack of a better word, their skin just starts to lack elasticity and basically just falls off. They usually don't live past 2 years old.
No.
Horrible condition. But thankfully, we do have that genetic test.
And because of this, we've been able to, start to get rid of a lot of these
Yes.
undesirable things that, were devastating. And, so it's good that we have these tests and that we can kind of be a little more picky about, hey, if we're going to breed this mare, let's be a little more selective about the stallion. So
I look at Pasafinos. Pasafinos is where DSLD was first identified. And for some reason, only in that breed, we were able to find a genetic link
Right.
to DSLD. And it's the only breed we've been able to find that in. The other breeds have it, but that one we were actually able to find a gene that coded for this condition. In one generation, because the association got serious about it, in one generation, we've all but wiped out DSLD and Pasafinos.
right.
So knowledge
Yes.
is power. And there's some other traits, unfortunately, that we don't have. We don't have a genetic test for. We're looking for it. We just don't have them. So I always look and say, okay, well, test for the things we can test. Make decisions based on that. These things we don't have genetic tests for, we really need to analyze the mare and analyze the stallion and say, okay, what's the likelihood that something
like this could happen? Right. So, genetic testing is one big component to looking into this. And then, being able fit to carry is kind of my other big category that I look at. So, we do, like we were talking about, these mares that have these, career ending injuries, and we say, hey, they can't perform what they need to, can they still carry? And unfortunately, some of these things, if they're really painful, like horses that are struggling with really chronic laminitis or DSLD or some of these things that they're just having difficulty, standing up in the morning and walking around in the pasture, are they going to be able to carry a foal comfortably for 11 plus months? And that's a lot of stress on your body. Anybody that's carried a baby themselves, I'm sure, could attest to that. So like we look at that as well. I mean, I've had some people that come to me with these like really nice mares and they say, hey, I want to breed them, and I'm like, okay, but we can't even stand up and walk soundly.
Right.
So, and there are some options that we can talk about, for kind of overcoming that. Embryo transfer is a really, kind of common thing now these days in practice, that is something that we're able to do, and we'll kind of talk about a little bit later in this podcast. But, that is something that we have to think about. And on top of that, age is up there as well. Any older mare is going to be a little bit more challenging to breed, especially a maiden mare that we've never tried to breed before. So if this mare is 18, 19, 20 years old and we're trying for the first time, we might be struggling a little bit trying to get her pregnant.
Now, I've definitely watched you go through that. Somebody comes in with the 18, 19, I think you even had one that was 20 years old.
Yes.
And they're wanting to foal out of this mare for the first time. And you were honest with them, like, hey, this is going to be an uphill road.
Yeah.
Everything's got to hit perfect. And even if everything does hit perfect, we still may not get a foal.
It's not impossible. It's just, it's much more tricky. And I think that's, kind of the other component too, that a lot of people get surprised of when we get into the breeding, is how expensive this can get very quickly.
Yes. And it's the work too. People think you just wait for the mare to come into heat and breed the mare. No. It, like I said, we say it starts this time of year. So what we're trying to, in the majority of breeds, these horses have a birthday of January 1. Quarter horses, race horses, a lot of the breeds that have futurity type events have aged classes. They're going to have a birthday January 1. So we're trying to time these foals where they're born as close to January 1 as we can, because a foal born January 2nd and a foal born June 1st, they're still considered 1 year old the next January. Well, obviously that's two different. I mean, we got 6 months difference there. And so as we're trying to get these mares timed up to where we can breed this time of year, a big thing we talk about is lights. So what is it with lights? You always hear us get these mares under lights. Let's talk about what are we doing? Why are we getting these mares under lights?
Right. So mares are their species is called seasonal polyestrous. There's your vocab for the day. Which means that it's a good vocab word.
Yep.
So seasonal polyestrous, that means that they are cycling during a certain point of the year, and they're having multiple cycles during that time, and then they have a period of inactivity. And so for mares, they are what we call long day breeders. So they need a longer amount of daylight compared to nighttime in order for them to be cycling normally. And, when we're in the dead of winter, or as, my dad used to call it, the pit of despair, in this time of the year where it's just dark all the time, we're not going to be cycling normally. So we have to kind of manipulate these mares into thinking that we're actually doing more, that we're actually in more of a light than dark. And so in order for mares to be completely cycling, they have to have 16 hours of continuous daylight and night as well. So they do need to have darkness. That has been shown time and time again that you can't just leave these mares permanently under lights. They do have to have some period of darkness in order for their REM cycles, or sorry, for their pineal gland to kind of continue its natural cycle. So one of the things that we'll say is get your mare under the lights. And so we'll say, if it's this time of the day and it's getting dark by 4:00, then we will put them in the barn and we'll leave the lights on for a certain amount of time, make sure we get to our thing, and then we'll turn the lights off at that point.
Timers work great for that. A really inexpensive timer can really help with this. And we talk about lumens, right? And everybody always says, well, what does 16 lumens look like? And what I was always told was, if you can read the fine print of a newspaper, you've got at least 16 lumens. Now, my question is that 20-year-old Dan that could read in the fine print of a newspaper, or is that now 45-year-old Dan? And do I get my glasses?
Are newspapers even a thing anymore?
Better question.
Yeah.
Even better question. Who's got a newspaper? I'd say light the thing up. You can't. I'd rather be too bright than not bright enough.
Right. So, but and the important part is having that darkness as well. They do need that. And then for our horses that aren't in a stall or a barn, they have contraptions that we can put over their head. It's a little mask. It's called an equilume, and it shines a light just kind of directly into one eye, and it is also on a timer, so you can turn it off and on. And so it's for our mares that just kind of live outside full time. Because normally, if we're not if we just let nature take its course and we're waiting, these mares aren't going to come into heat until, down here it's usually mid-April. And they're usually cycling until kind of about September-ish is usually when they start to kind of come out of that transition. So, if we're only starting to breed in mid-April and then we're, say we get it first try, that mare is not going to be foaling until, May at the soonest. And so for these breeds where we do need to have them as close to January 1st as possible, these lights are a good alternative.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. Get them under lights. The other thing we need to be thinking about is this is also time of year we start doing cultures, start doing cytologies. We're going to say, hey, when you get your mare in, get them under lights, get them cycling. Then we need to get them in and we need to clean them up. So describe that process. What are we doing there?
So, before we even start trying to put semen in the mare, we're going to want to make sure that our uterine environment is healthy, that our mare is healthy, and that she's, again, fit to carry this foal. So, stuff we'll do before we even start the breeding process is we'll do an ultrasound of her reproduction tract. We'll make sure that, all the parts look the same. She's got 2 ovaries that are functioning and her uterine body is okay. And she doesn't have any, cyst or little fibrotic tissue or anything like that that would eventually potentially prevent a embryo from adhering to the wall. So we'll look at structure. Sometimes we'll do blood work to just look at, normal vitals. We'll look at, hormone levels if we're concerned about that. And then we'll do a culture and cytology of the uterine lining. And so that will tell us, is there any inflammation in the uterus? Is there bacteria that we potentially need to treat, which involves, antibiotics and infusions. So we'll flush all that, pollution out of there and try to get it as clean as possible. If we're concerned about, for potentially mares that maybe haven't been able to successfully get pregnant for a couple cycles, we can do a biopsy of the uterine wall, and we can actually, we have a grading system that tells us, what is the likelihood for this mare to carry a foal to term. And so, sometimes if we have these mares we've been trying and we can't get them pregnant, or we get them pregnant and they can't stay that way, this will be kind of a good way for us to, at least put like a number value to it and say, hey, maybe this mare isn't fit to carry, so let's look into other options.
Well, and I think, we talk about these uteruses, and I think a big problem, or, one of the things that can set us up for failure is bad anatomy, right?
Yes.
Because when you look at a mare, the rectum sits above the vulva. And so some of them can actually have a sunken in conformation that can lead to urine pooling in the vagina, can lead to fecal contamination. And so that's really important to know those things going in, because you don't want to be 2 or 3 breedings in before you figure out you got this problem.
Right.
Let's find that problem now, and let's get a plan put together so that when it does come time to have that expensive semen shipped in, your mare's ready.
Right.
We're not finding out then like, oh, we got a problem.
Right. And it kind of allows us to plan ahead. So if we know that we say, hey, this mare is a urine pooler, going into breeding, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't breed her, but, we'll take some extra precautions when we do get to the breeding. So we'll, probably clean her up before the breeding season starts. And then when we do get into the breeding, we can say, hey, we need to make sure that we're flushing this mare out before we put the semen in there so that we've got the cleanest environment possible. And then maybe flush her out again when we're done. So
I think we said to have a plan.
yes.
One of the things I routinely say is breeding a mare is not a single act, but a process.
No, it is a process.
It is a process. And there's a lot going on.
Yes.
And I do want to back up for a minute, because we kind of ran through it. We talked about culture and cytology. One of the, probably, in my opinion, now I do very little breed work, but I do some consulting on it. And I preach this all the time because it was beat into my head. A culture is great, but if you don't have a cytology, it may be useless information.
Right.
You've got to have that cytology.
Right.
Because you could have picked up a contaminant and the uterus be fine.
Yeah.
The cytology, where we look at those cells and say, hey, we've got intercellular gram-positive cocci. That culture comes back with a gram-positive cocci type bacteria. We know it's real. If we go in there and we got gram-positive cocci everywhere, but it comes back with a gram-negative rod, we probably need to go reculture that mare.
Right.
So,
because again, it's not exactly the cleanest environment when we're getting things, so it's very easy to get contaminants too. So, it's the cytology is, like you said, just as important. And then there's this, very annoying thing called a biofilm too, which can
oh Lord, yes.
which can build in there, which is basically you create this like mini ecosystem inside of the uterus, and you can't really necessarily kill one bacteria. You kind of have to get all of it. And
biofilm I equate to, if you've ever been in a college student's apartment shower. If you've been in there, that's what a biofilm is. It's just it's a nasty environment.
Yeah.
And we've learned over the years, we knew about biofilm, but now we're actually culturing, doing biofilm assays, trying to figure out what we should do with this biofilm. Because that biofilm, it's real.
Oh yeah, it's real. I mean, and you can flush them, you can throw antibiotics in there all you want, but it's not coming out.
No,
unless you get aggressive with it.
Yeah, and antibiotics are useless in the place.
Yeah.
In the presence of a biofilm. And again, that's why we need to start early. Because if we're dealing with this, we don't want to find out after we've bred for the first time. We want to find that out beforehand so that we're not, all right, now it's April, we breed, doesn't go well. Then we look into this. And when we look into it, we find biofilm, we found a nasty bacteria in there. All of a sudden, we had a Klebsiella setup shop. And now you're looking at somebody's like, okay, well, now we're in this for months. We've got a couple months of cleaning this up, unfortunately.
Right.
Or maybe in a couple months, we're going to miss 2 or 3 heat cycles getting this cleaned up.
Right.
So now we've delayed it even further. Now we're getting into congratulations, you got a 4th of July baby.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these stallions stop collecting too after a certain time. 4th of July for a lot of these stallions, they shut down. They're done. But like a lot of the quarter horses, like they don't, because again, most of their foals are on the ground by, they want them as close to that time as possible. So they're saying like, we're done for the season. We'll see you next year.
Yeah.
So
we got a window here.
Yeah, we have a very small window, and so we want to be aggressive with it. We want to be proactive and try. So that's why it can be frustrating when somebody's like, "I want to breed my mare," and I'm like, "It's May. It's May."
Well, and I think too, you've got to look when you're going in, and like I said, we kind of ran through it, but we'll go back. We're doing that initial exam. We're looking at the conformation of that rectum and vulva, how that's set up. Doing the ultrasound, because you do that early and you've got a bunch of cysts in the uterus. Well, now we can look at, hey, do we need to go in and laser cysts? We've got treatments available that we can set us up for success.
Right.
Or we may go in and say, hey, you got a lot of cysts in the uterus. Feeling your cervix, you've had previous foals in the past, you've got damage to the cervix. This thing's not going to close. The cervix is what separates the vagina from the uterus. And it kind of forms that seal once that baby's in there that keeps that environment sterile. You can get damage to that cervix, and that cervix is unable to perform that job. Again, if we know that ahead of time, we can say, okay, we got to make a different plan. Either there are some surgeries available for fixing the cervix, or we may say, we might want to look at ICSI. Because this mare, we're not even going to be able to get it. We don't even know if we can get an embryo out of this mare.
Right.
So maybe we need to look at ICSI, or maybe
or embryo transfer.
Things like that.
Right.
So having that plan early so we can get that plan put together is important.
Right. And so, kind of jumping into embryo transfer, that's, it's a kind of, I don't even want to call it new, but I think it's just more accessible because, I think more and more, practitioners are figuring out how to do it and that it is successful. So basically what this is you have your donor mare and, she's not going to carry her own foal. Either, she's not fit to carry it, or she's a performance mare and she's showing and we don't want her to, be pregnant and showing. So we take the embryo out of her and then we put it into a donor mare or into a recipient mare. And then we have the recipient carry. And, there's a lot of qualifications for finding a good recipient mare. There's a size thing. We don't want a little tiny pony carrying a big warm blood foal. We like mares that are, kind of bigger, stockier. Attitude is part of it as well. Sometimes you want a mare that's kind of nice to handle. A lot of times we like mares too that have done this before. They already kind of have that maternal instinct, so they're just really good moms. But
they're reproductively sound.
Yes, they're reproductively sound. We know that, they've got good conformation back there. We're not worried about, repeat infections. They've delivered lots of foals before. They don't have tons of damage in there from previous foalings. So, there's good candidates for it. And, if we decide that, hey, we're going to go on the embryo transfer route, that's a whole nother thing we have to plan for because we have to find a recipient. And finding a recipient can be really, really challenging. You can't just take any old mare and be like, yeah, she's going to be my recip.
Well, a lot of times by this time of the year, most of the recipient mares out there, they're spoken for. So there's companies that have large herds of recipient mares that are available to have your embryo transplanted into. But those embryo transfer mares are almost like real estate, right?
Yes.
Like
they're valuable.
There's a limited number of hotels in an area. If there's a big event, that hotel's booked. Well, breeding season's a big event. So a lot of these people that have great embryo transfer mares, they're booked. And it's also difficult because most embryo transfer mares, they have that foal, they don't get another embryo that year. like they're going to nurse that foal, and they won't be available to the following
Right,
year.
right.
So, because they're at someone else's farm, they're no longer at the facility. And so, again, we need to have that plan. Like, if we know embryo transfer is where we're going to go, we need to start booking those mares August, September. Like, you need to get your mare booked.
Yeah, a lot of times
early.
they open up that they're like, all right, our recipient list is open, and I mean it's full by the end of the week.
Quickly.
It's very, very quick, so you have to be very proactive and do it. So
So, again, not a spur of the minute decision.
no,
Especially if you're going to embryo transfer. And just because you have another mare does not mean you have a built-in ET mare.
right, right.
Embryo transfer mare or recipient mare. That mare may not be reproductively sound either.
No, no.
So, again,
A lot of things to think about before again, and like we haven't even really gotten into talking about, well, what is the reproductive cycle and any of that? Like we haven't gotten into any of that.
we've just gotten you checked out, and we're just talking about what do you need to plan for when you say want to breed a mare.
Yes, exactly. Because again, with these, when people come up to me and they're like, I want to breed my mare, I'm like, okay, but have you really thought about this? Like, have you really sat down and thought about the commitment that you're getting into? And most of the time, once I've explained all of this to them, they're like, yeah, maybe we need to table that. I'm like, yeah.
Well, so we get into timing on that. So we've got them under lights. We've done all the things. We're ready to breed. So now breeding sheds are going to open up. We're going to start shipping usually around February is when people start shipping, mid-February. Everything's ready to go. We're syncing your mare up.
Yep.
So how many checks are you going to do? Because, I mean, you've got to, well, let's back up. We're going to go forward to back up. What's the timing to put semen in a mare? Where do you want them to be? How close to ovulation do you need to have the semen in that mare?
Yeah. So, and to kind of answer that question, we have to talk about the reproductive cycle itself. So, in a regular cycling mare, once she's, gone through her transition period and she's full on cycling, it's springtime. Our cycle is 21 days long, and there's kind of two phases of that. We've got estrus, which is where she's showing signs that she's ready to be bred and she's leading up to ovulation. That ends, and then we go into diestrus, which is kind of this, it's almost like a pseudo-pregnancy state. It's the body kind of getting itself ready to be pregnant, and it's looking for that embryo to be ready to support following the ovulation. So when the mare is in estrus, we're seeing all these, kind of typical signs of like mares in heat. So, they're flirty, as I like to say. They're kind of lifting their tail. They'll kind of go to the stallion if you tease them to one, and they might kind of turn their butt toward them and like lift their tail up and kind of pee all over themselves. So they're like, hey, I'm ready for a baby. I want my semen. I'm ready to go. So when we're getting up to this time, it's called estrus because we're getting this big rise in estrogen in the body. So and when we look at it in there, we're seeing the uterus is nice and soft, and we're watching this follicle grow. And our follicle is the egg that is about to be ovulated. So we're watching it on ultrasound, and it's kind of growing. We call it the dominant follicle because there's usually lots of little follicles that are kind of popping up here and there everywhere, and this one starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And at this, we're kind of waiting for it to get to a certain size. About 35 millimeter diameter is our target size for these. And once they get to that point, we say, okay, we can get this mare to ovulate. So at that point, we will give them a drug called GnRH, and this starts this kind of ovulation, cascade. And so when we give them this GnRH, it stimulates the pituitary gland to make a hormone called luteinizing hormone, or LH, and that surge is what causes this ova to ovulate. And so during that time, we've got once we administer that drug, we have about 40 hours for that, before that follicle ovulates. And when we get this semen, we have to look very closely at like what type of semen we're dealing with. So fresh semen is going to be, your most ideal. It's going to have the highest, percentage of, normal active sperm. Because when we're putting the semen into the mare, we want to have the minimum of 1 billion like active progressively motile sperm is what we call it. And so when we're putting this in them, we have to look at, fresh semen's obviously going to be the best. If we're dealing with, shipped semen, so it came from somewhere else and it got mailed to us, some of that semen is going to die the second it's out of the body. So we have to do some calculations to see how much we're going to put in there. If we're dealing with frozen semen and it's gone through a whole process of, getting frozen down and, all this, we're going to have even less motility. So we have to be really, really careful about what we're putting in and how much we're putting in and when we're doing it. So the normal, kind of fresh sperm, they can live in the body for up to a week almost. It's, they can hang around, but most of them are usually going to be dead within about 24 to 48 hours after being put into the mare. So, we want to time when we're putting that semen into as close as possible. So, I like to personally, the second I get the semen, I want to put it in the mare because semen is always going to be happier in the mare than in the fridge.
The way one of my professors in vet school put it goes, man has yet to create a syringe that's as good of environment as a uterus.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So put it in.
Right. So we put it in, and I like to do my protocol where I put it in at about 24 hours before I think they're going to ovulate. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we'll do another one, right at about when they're ovulating. We try to get it as close to. But then once that ova has ovulated, it's only alive for about another 8 hours.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's only alive for that. So once the mare's ovulated, you're kind of stuck. So one of the things we do if we're breeding with frozen semen, like we said, it's a lot, there's a lot less, active sperm in there. We will check them every 6 hours because we will try to get that dose in there as close to ovulation as possible. So we'll sit and we'll watch them and we say, okay, at 12 o'clock, you didn't ovulate. At 6 o'clock, you ovulated. So sometime in that 6 hour time span, you ovulated. So we're going to put that semen in you and we're going to go in here because we know that we've got, this kind of 8 hour window that we're working with. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very, time sensitive process and people have been doing it for, centuries before we even got, any of the ultrasound technology or any of the, there's blood tests that you can do, there's all kinds of stuff out there that we do. But, when we're trying to be efficient like this and we're like, okay, we want to try to put the most amount of semen in there as possible. We want to do this, as efficiently and try to get it as close to here. It's kind of the best thing that we've come up with because.
No, I agree. And, another thing is tracking these mares. You talk about we want that 35 millimeter follicle. Mm-hmm. Over the years, we've had some that 35 millimeters, they're ready to ovulate.
Yeah.
We've had some that they got to build like 42s.
50s.
I've seen them like in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I think, you talk about GnRH, Sucremate. Mm-hmm. Sister Ellen, I've used quite a bit of it.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be like the wonder drug, 12, ovulate within 12 hours.
They laugh at my Sucremate.
I'm on the fence. I got some that works great.
Yeah, there's
some it doesn't.
And it's interesting. It's definitely like mare to mare. Like I've had some that I'm like, yeah, she doesn't listen to my Sucremate, so I just kind of have to see what she does and check her.
Well, and that's where I was going is like knowing like if we can track these mares through a cycle before we breed them, to know like, hey, this mare doesn't ovulate till she's like a 42. Mm-hmm. And I've worked on some big breeding farms. I do some consulting work, and that's one of the things that we have. Luckily, is we're breeding the same mares year after year, and so it gets very easy because we know that top flight whoever doesn't even think about ovulating until she's at a 42. And then we also have an idea to go from a 35 to a 42 that normally takes X many days in her. Mm-hmm. When we have these mares we're breeding for the first time, you're trying to figure that out. So we know 35, we should be able to get them to ovulate.
We should. However,
they may have different ideas.
And you add an even more complicated factor in it, in that 90+% of the time the stallion's not here. The stallion is in another state or sometimes in another country.
And they collect on Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yes.
Or they collect Tuesday, Thursday. Mm-hmm.
And so we have to try to time that out with getting the semen from the stallion. And so, we'll kind of be trying to we try to, hormonally manipulate these mares to kind of work on our own schedule. And, we can only control nature so much sometimes, but, we'll call the stallion shed and we say, hey, this mare is ready to go. I need semen. They say, great. They put it in a box and they ship it, and then it gets stuck in the Dallas airport, and I get a little sad.
Or my favorite is you call it in, like, hey, we need semen on Wednesday, or we need semen shipped Wednesday. Like, great, we'll collect. You get the call midday Wednesday, stallion wouldn't jump.
Yeah.
So you've done everything you should, and the stallion's like, not today.
Or
I'm not collecting today.
I got one, and normally this stallion was really really good active semen, and I get it, and everything is dead. And I called the shed and I said, hey, what's going on? And they're like, oh, he colicked last week.
Yes.
So,
and that can knock it out.
It can knock it out. Yeah,
there's a lot of things to make that semen. Like, they get a really high fever, that semen could be dead. People never think about the stallion part of it, but once that sperm is produced, it's a 60-day transit, and it's maturing during that time.
Right.
They get a really high fever during that time, they may cook all that sperm.
Yeah.
And these horses may not have good semen for
months.
Months.
And it's super devastating. And so if you've ever been to like one of these, like breeding sheds where they keep all these stallions, I mean, these stallions are very well taken care of. Like, they are living the life.
Yes.
So.
And like I said, so, you've done everything right. Mm-hmm. You've got the whole mare timed up.
Yeah.
We still got another horse that's got to play ball.
Exactly.
And so then you think the answer is going to be frozen, right? Mm-hmm. All right, great. We got some frozen semen. We ship it in. We got it sitting here in a tank at the clinic. It's ready to go. Mm-hmm. We time everything up. But let's talk about percentages. So if you're looking at so live cover's the gold standard.
Live
right?
covers are gold standard. It's going to be the freshest thing. It's
still, what are we looking at? 70, 80%.
80%. If I have like 80% of the sperm that are in there are like progressively motile, like normal like anatomy to them, I'm like, this is good. This is happy. Are like, kind of shipped, cooled. So it's about 24 hours old at that point. If I can get 50%, I'm usually pretty happy with that.
I'm gonna say, because that's what a lot of people need to understand is I think the last stats I read, there was some people reporting up to 60% chance of conception on a single dose. Mm-hmm. Chilled semen, AI. And we all feel like rock stars with that number of 60 because 60. When we first started doing this, that was not the case.
Because what they do when they, like, after they've collected it from the stallion, they usually, like, they do some math. They, like, they're looking at the volume of it. They're looking at concentration. They divide it up into how many doses. Because, again, most of these stallions that are breeding, they're not just breeding to one mare. They're breeding to lots of mares. And so you may have 3 or 4 mares call on the same day and say, hey, we need semen. And, so they have to take it and they have to divide it up into, all of the doses.
When you've got to put an extender in there, that also helps keeps it alive while Delta, FedEx, whoever's working this time of year, however fast we need to get it, the best way he ships, we got to put that in that extender so the semen will survive the transit.
Right. And so once it gets here, and some of the semen actually really likes the extender. I've had some that their motility is kind of questionable when it comes out of the stallion, because most of the time they send us a report of how the stallion collected that day, like what the volume was, everything. And so the motility will be kind of meh, like when it comes out, and then I get it and I'm like, wow, these things are swimming. Like,
yes.
Yeah, they like their juice. But
and that's the thing, once the shed puts it in the box, FedEx picks it up, we have no idea what's happening from there.
No.
It's cooled, it's insulated. But if you've ever been in the cargo hold of the cargo hold of the plane is not heated. It's not cooled. It's not insulated. It's at 30,000 feet. Mm-hmm.
And then it lands in Georgia where it's 95 degrees. Yes. And so it's going from this like cold shock to hot shock.
And doing all we can to make sure the stuff arrives the best.
Yeah.
And sometimes we got to send it Delta Dash, which if y'all aren't familiar with that, it's literally you drive down to the airport with a box of semen. They hand it to you. It goes underneath a Delta flight, and that may be the Delta. Let's say that flight's leaving Seattle. Your stallion's in Seattle. It's going to go under that plane in Seattle, and we're going to literally drive down to the Delta Terminal, Atlanta, and when that flight from Seattle carrying passengers lands, a box of semen's coming out from underneath it. And so we can have this stuff sometimes within, in the same day that it's collected.
Yeah.
But again, you're at the mercy of how does it get shipped, and there's a lot of variables here.
Yes.
Leading up to about a 50 to 60% conception. So everybody's really excited. We've done all this work. Life's great. Everything's done perfect. We put the semen in, and now we got to hope the mare does her job and gets pregnant. And that's going to happen about 50% of the time.
Yeah, right. And so that's that. And then we get to the frozen, and if I can get 30% on frozen, I'm pretty happy.
That's the rock star day. 30% on
30%,
frozen.
you're like, woo, we're cooking here.
And so what we're saying there, keeping up with this topic of, so you want to breed your mare, be prepared to have to do this more than once. So you got to be ready to do this more than once. Because the odds are you're going to have to do it more than once.
Right. And the stallion contracts are interesting too. There's some like that are, I know a lot of the quarter horse ones, they have like a yearly contract. So they say, hey, like this is your fee for the year. And then sometimes there's like extra costs for the shipping. So how many times you have to order the semen. And then there's other stallions, like I know in Europe, they charge you per straw that you buy. And one frozen straw is usually not a full dose.
No.
So I've had some people bring me one straw, and I said, okay.
Where's the rest of it?
Where's the rest of it? And they're like, that's all I bought. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna work with this.
Yeah, we got like 100.
We're gonna work with it, but
we got 100,000 sperm cells in here when it was frozen.
And I need 1 billion.
Need 1 billion.
I need 1 billion.
So. And you think about why you need so many. Well, I always joke, like, it's got a long way to go, right?
It does.
The uterus, it's got to go through the uterine body, through the uterine horn, and it's got to get all the way up to where
And there's 2 uterine horns, so some of it's going to go one way. Some of it's going to go the right way.
And my running joke's always like, remember, these came from men. They're not going to stop and ask for directions. No. They're going to get lost along the way. So we got to send 1 million in there and hope
that one of them.
Somebody asks directions and somebody eventually finds out where they're supposed to be. But good news, it does only take one.
It just takes one.
So,
I've had some that I get it and I'm like, well, there's not a lot in here. We're gonna put it in anyway. And then you get lucky.
Right.
I don't know. There's one sperm in there that's just chugging along.
So we talk about this, and let's kind of gonna retouch on this. You've got all this going on just to get the semen in the mare. You have all these variables going on. You've got not great odds. If you don't do your homework beforehand, making sure the mare doesn't have any reproductive issues, she's cycling normally, she's clean, she's got good conformation. You don't have all those things in order, and now we've already got all this stuff right there at the time of breeding that we've got going on. Your odds are going way down.
Yeah.
And so I can't encourage you enough, like, do your homework on the front side. Do the things that need to be done, because we've already got this. I think that's why I don't like breeding. There's just too many variables in it for me. It's like too much all over the place. So I leave it to people like you. My world, I want them all in diasterous. My ovaries in diasterous to keep it forming. But, you've got all this stuff. And so, again, I think breeding comes down to doing all the little things right.
Yes.
Not skipping any steps, not trying to cut corners anywhere, doing all these things right, because we've got enough chaos. Like, just when we get down to we put the semen in the mare, there's enough chaos. Like I said, we're going to send 1 billion sperm in there, hoping one gets there.
Yeah. I have picked up sperm from the airport at 2 a.m.
Yep.
Because that is how time sensitive this is. We're like, hey, this mare is going to ovulate. We've got a very small window of time, and we got to get this done.
Yep.
So it is, those days are hectic.
Yes.
Like, those few days that we're working with, they are so precious.
And so doing your homework on the front side, starting now, making sure this mare's ready to go is crucial.
Yes.
Because like I said, even when we get down to the day of actual breeding, we got enough to worry about that day. We don't need to find out then. We don't need to go in to breed this mare and what's this stuff coming out of your ears?
Yeah. Why is there gunk in here? What's
Yeah.
all this? Yeah.
So,
Because it's devastating when you get in there and you're like, oh no, oh, it's a swamp.
and that's why most of the time, like, you're going to breed a mare, y'all are checking them, and they start getting close to ovulation, like, okay, they need to come hang out at the clinic.
Yeah. It's if we have them here, we can do it on our time. If the semen comes in super late at night, we can easily get over here, put the semen in. If we need to check them a couple times during the day, we can easily get it done. It's
This is that time of year where we're all involved because, you may be doing the breeding, but you got to have help doing it. And so now our late text, our night text, is like, hey, be ready. Semen's going to get here. Delta says it's going to land at midnight. I'll be back at 1:30.
Yep.
2 in the morning.
Yep.
And we're going to breed this mare.
A
mean-
lot of late night breeding parties.
I know I've been up here and seen you come in at all hours of the night breeding a mare. I may be up here with an emergency. And
Yeah.
next thing I know, here comes Dr. Brown sliding in sideways.
Yep, we'll do it then. We do it on weekends, middle of the night,
And I
first thing in the
I
morning.
think
Like,
this is where spouses need a huge shout out because it's amazing how many times there's a spouse involved because it's like, hey, I got to breed this mare. I need help. You're going with me.
oh yeah, no, my he can hold a twitch.
Yes.
It's about all he can do, but
I've my wife has accompanied me on one of the few mares I bred. I was like, actually, I'm gonna need you to go with me. And so it's a big shout out to the unsung heroes.
yes.
Of the breeding season, and that's the spouses that get roped into.
I've seen some vets bring their kids.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They got the kid back there scrubbing, like
It's always
doing a
amazing.
hot water bath. Like
So it's it's a great thing when it works. It's a fantastic process, but the thing I can tell everybody is like if you're considering this, start having these conversations with your vet now.
yeah.
Listen to them, start getting prepared. I would rather you be prepared in the last minute, not do it, than not be prepared in the last minute and decide you're going to do it. Because again, there's a lot of steps, and all we've done at this point in time is bred the mare.
No. We haven't even talked about let's pick a stallion,
No.
let's do this,
Well, and then the next episode is like, okay, we've bred your mare. What is the next?
what do we do now?
What does the next year look like?
Yeah.
Like all we've done at this point in time is get your mare bred,
Yeah.
and then I always say then it's the longest 14 days in vet med, because in 14 days we're going to bring your mare in and see if we got a foal or not. And so you do everything right. Mare's bred. Well, now we all hold our breath for the next 14 days. Are we the 60%? Are we the 40%? So it's a process, not something that needs to be taken lightly. Like I said, it's not a single act. You don't just breed your mare.
Nope.
This is a process to breed your mare. Start early, be prepared. So, well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you've got questions about breeding, reach out to Dr. Brown here. She'll be more than happy to help you with that. And like I said, if you're getting ready to breed your mare, your vet will thank you. Go ahead and pick up the phone, call them. I want to start breeding a mare. They've done this before. They're going to lay out a plan for you. We're going to get this moving forward, but start early. I kind of like voting, right? Breed early and breed often. You plan on multiple chances. Don't hope for one shot, because I don't care how good they are, how good your vet is at this. I don't care how good your mare is. Things happen. Like you've seen, there's a lot of chaos. It seems like it's a lot of organized chaos.
A lot of organized chaos.
And there's more things that have to go right, very little room.
I think is why I like it, because
I think so.
there's so much chaos to it that when you finally have the success, you're like, yes, we did it,
And
conquered.
I'll never forget this vet Tad Aglaw. I think he said it best. Tad was one at the forefront of a lot of reproductive stuff, and he one time said, if you do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, exactly how you're supposed to do it, you can get a large percentage in foal. But again, what you're supposed to do, exactly when you're supposed to do it, exactly how you're supposed to do it, not the time to cut corners.
Nope.
Do it right.
Do it right.
So, well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hopefully this answers some of the questions about, so you want to foal, you want to breed a mare. If y'all have more questions, like I said, reach out to us, reach out to your vet. We're going to be talking about this more as we're getting in ready to go into breeding season. We're going to be having a few more of these on, so you want to have a baby. So thanks for tuning in, and Dr. Brown, thanks for being here today.
As always.
And look forward to seeing y'all soon. Again, if you've got any questions, you got any topics you want us to discuss, shoot us a message, send us an email, make a phone call, smoke signal, however you want to get us a word to us. Let us know, and we'll be happy to do that. Thanks.